I remember the exact moment I became a traitor. Not with a gun, not with a bomb, but with ink. The quill scraped across cheap parchment, each stroke louder than the pounding of my heart. My hand trembled not from fear of death. I had processed millions of execution orders, but from the knowledge that these words would erase 27 years of obedience. My name, my rank, and a formal request to be extracted from Imperial space. It felt absurd. For decades, I had been a servant of words, filing death tolls, stamping approvals, correcting propaganda. Now words were the dagger I drove into the Imperium's chest. Outside the vents of Thus Prime spat their usual poison into the night. Inside my hab unit, the heating had failed again. The cold made my joints ache, my breath fog against the flickering lumen strips. Fitting, I thought that betrayal should be born in the same silence that had smothered my life. When the courier arrived, he did not speak. He did not need to. One look at my shaking hands, and he knew I had crossed a line. He slipped the parchment into his sleeve, nodded once, and left. By dawn, he would vanish into the network of whispers, smugglers, and defectors. The Inquisition swore did not exist. I sat alone in the dark, listening to the echo of my own breathing. Perhaps my message would be intercepted. Perhaps I would be executed before nightfall. But one truth burned clear: I had not changed sides. I had changed the way I breathed. They told me to wait by the western refuse port at midnight. No possessions, no second thoughts. The words echoed in my skull as I shuffled through the smoke-choked streets of Thus Prime. Factories loomed like black giants, vomiting waste into the sky. The air carried the sour tang of chemical runoff and burned oil. My robes, once neat in the way of an administratum scribe, clung damp against my skin. I told myself it was only sweat, but I knew it was fear leaking through me. The refuse port was where the unwanted went, rusted, machinery-toxic slurry. Corpses unfit for burial. Barges lined up like vultures, their holds yawning open to receive the trash of 1,000,000 lives. Workers in tattered masks moved like ghosts through the haze, dragging containers, never looking at one another, never speaking. They had learned the same lesson I had: silence was survival. I slipped behind a corroded storage tank and waited. The smell nearly gagged me. Ammonia, rot, hot metal cooling in the night. Each breath scraped my throat raw. Every shadow seemed to lean closer. Would the Inquisition storm in? Would Arbites drag me out by the collar? Then movement. At first, I thought it was another worker, just another bent figure among thousands. But this one broke stride. He veered toward me with purpose, eyes hidden behind a cracked visor. My heart hammered. Had they found me already? The figure raised a hand, 3 fingers extended, thumb. Tucked a gesture meaningless to most, but drilled into me by rumor. A signal. He pointed to a row of waste barges, then turned away without a word. I followed. The barge groaned under mountains of refuse, but behind it, tucked beneath torn camouflage netting, crouched a shape too smooth, too deliberate to be Imperial scrap. A shuttle. Small, functional, painted in dull grays that swallowed the light. The pilot was waiting. I had never seen a Tau before. Stories painted them as grotesque or insectoid. Instead, the being before me was alien, yes, but not monstrous. Tall, with ash-gray skin and eyes like black pools, his armor gleamed with sleek efficiency, lacking the brutal spikes and rivets of Imperial design. He did not speak. He merely gestured for me to board. Inside, the air was cold, but clean. Lights glowed faint blue along the walls. The cabin smelled faintly of metal and ozone, not decay. 3 humans were already there. They avoided my eyes, their faces hollowed by long fear. One was a woman with a scar bisecting her cheek. Another, a wiry man clutching his knees. The third stared at the floor as though it held his only hope of survival. I wanted to ask their names. I wanted to cling to any shred of humanity. But my throat locked tight. Better not to know. Better not to speak. The hatch sealed. The hum of engines stirred beneath our feet. I braced for alarms, for spotlights cutting the night, for sirens and gunships and arbites tearing us apart before we left atmosphere. For 27 years, I had processed security protocols. I knew how many levels of detection existed around a world like Thus Prime. Escape was impossible. And yet, nothing. The shuttle shuddered once, twice, then lifted. The pressure pressed me into my seat lungs, straining as we pierced the toxic haze. The lights of the city dwindled below smears of sickly yellow, vanishing into the black. The woman with the scar finally spoke. Her voice was rough but steady. "Former guard," she asked. I shook my head. "Administratum, scribe third class." She studied me unimpressed. "Not many of your kind jump. Too comfortable." I almost laughed. Comfortable. If comfort meant bent spines, ruined lungs, and the slow death of filing lies until your soul rotted. But I said only, I saw things. Her eyes softened just a fraction. We all did. Then she fell silent again. The shuttle tilted. My stomach lurched as gravity released its hold. The weightless moment was disorienting, almost joyous. I glanced at the viewport. Stars stretched across the void, cold and brilliant. For the first time in my life, I looked at them not as distant symbols on a report, but as roads that led away. Still doubt gnawed. Had it been this easy, or had the Imperium simply let us go, intending to follow to crush, not just me, but the network that dared spirit traitors away? The hum of the engines deepened. I clutched the armrest until my knuckles whitened. I thought of the Inquisition dossiers I had stamped. The names vanished overnight, the whispered rumors of interrogation pits. If they caught me, there would be no mercy. But the shuttle did not falter. No alarms, no pursuit. Only the soft vibration of alien machinery carrying us farther from the empire I had once believed eternal. I closed my eyes, but I did not pray. The Emperor demanded obedience, not mercy, and I had already broken my oath. Instead, I whispered to myself a mantra of survival. Just one more minute, one more breath, one more heartbeat closer to freedom. The stars did not answer, but the shuttle climbed higher, and the world I had betrayed shrank beneath me. Perhaps I had escaped, or perhaps I had just stepped into a new kind of prison, one I could not yet see. They gave us no names, only numbers. When the shuttle docked with the larger vessel, we were herded out like cargo. The tow were efficient. Their movements practiced precise. No barking orders, no lashes, no Arbite's clubs cracking against bone. Only hand signals, murmurs in their own tongue, and the occasional phrase in Gothic that felt eerily flawless. The corridor smelled different, sterile metallic tinged with something faintly sweet. Not the rot of Thus Prime, not the damp mold of Administratum archives. Clean, too clean. My stomach twisted. For the first time in decades, I did not feel smothered by the stink of my homeworld, and that absence felt like a warning. They guided us into a chamber with low ceilings and smooth white walls. Blue light pulsed in deliberate rhythms. Seats were arranged in a circle, not rows. We were expected to face each other as though this were communal, equal. A tow officer entered. His armor bore no spikes, no skulls, no grotesque decorations, only clean lines of polished insignia. His skin was the color of ash, his eyes pools of bottomless black. He spoke Gothic better than most Imperials I had known. "Welcome," he said. His voice was calm, almost soothing. "You are no longer subjects. You are participants. You have left behind your chains. You are here to serve the greater good." The words slid into me like warm water. Not because I believed them, Emperor knows belief had long since fled my heart, but because they were offered without menace. No threat, no fire and brimstone sermons of damnation. Just certainty spoken like a parent coaxing a frightened child. The scarred woman beside me leaned forward. "What do you want from us?" Her tone was steel, but I heard the tremor beneath. The officer's smile was faint, almost imperceptible. "We want you to find purpose. To contribute not because you are forced, but because you see the benefit. In time, you will understand. I wanted to laugh. In the Imperium, I had been told the same thing 1,000 times. Your work is holy. Your numbers keep the machine running. Your silence is duty. But that had always been shouted, beaten, carved into my marrow. This was offered gently. Another human, the wiry man who had clutched his knees on the shuttle, whispered, "And if we don't understand," the tow officer did not blink. "Then we will teach you again, until you do." The words should have chilled me. Instead, I felt only exhaustion. To be taught, not punished. To be guided, not threatened. Even if it was another form of prison, it was at least one lined with cushions rather than nails. They played us a recording then. A hollow projection unfolded above the circle images of cities' rebuilt children playing soldiers and aliens, working side by side. Fields of grain stretching under twin suns' laughter carried on the wind, all under the emblem of the toe. My gut twisted. Propaganda, of course. Every empire had its lies. Yet the images did not drip with blood or glory. They spoke of peace. And that in itself was alien. I remembered my decades in the scriptorium tallying casualty reports, approving requisition orders for coffins, revising population charts downward with each new campaign. There had never been peace in those numbers, only slow decay. The projection ended. Silence followed. Then the officer's eyes found mine. He seemed to see straight through the layers of grime guilt and cowardice. "You are more than numbers," he said. My chest tightened. How could he know? For 27 years I had been nothing but numbers. I had reduced lives to lines on parchment, checked boxes, sealed fates. My worth had been measured in efficiency and obedience. Now an alien told me I was more. It was a lie, surely. But a lie I wanted desperately to believe. They dismissed us without chains. Our quarters were plain but warm, with functioning heat and clean bedding. No icons of the Emperor, no shrines of skulls, no incense choking the air. Just blank walls and silence. I sat on the bed staring at my hands. They still shook as though expecting the Arbites to crash through the door at any moment. But no one came. The woman with the scar stopped at my doorway. "You going to drink their water?" she asked. I frowned. She held up a canteen, tapping it with one finger. "First test. They'll see if you swallow their gift." I stared at the glass of clear liquid left on the desk. Not cloudy, not rust-tinted. Pure. The kind of water we rationed like treasure on Thus Prime. I lifted it to my lips. It was cool, refreshing clean. Too clean. Her mouth twisted into a half-smile. "Then you've already chosen." She left. I sat there staring at the empty glass, the taste lingering on my tongue. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the moment I swallowed, I surrendered. But in that instant, I felt alive, hydrated, human again. Was that surrender or salvation? I lay back on the bed, the hum of alien engines vibrating through the walls. Sleep pulled at me, but unease kept my eyes open. For the first time, I wondered if the greater good was not a doctrine but a drug. Something you consumed without question until it was all you knew. I closed my eyes. In the darkness, I heard the officer's words again. "You are more than numbers." And a terrible, treacherous thought bloomed in my mind. What if he was right? Perhaps betrayal was not a fall into damnation, but a climb into a different kind of faith. They called it an honor. Weeks had passed in that strange half-life aboard the tow vessel. No whips, no sermons, only lessons, language drills, history recited like scripture but without the fire. The greater good was never screamed. It was spoken softly, as if truth had no need for a volume. And then came the summons. I was led into a chamber filled with sterile light and the low thrum of machines. At its center stood a reclined chair, metal restraints gleaming like polished bone. Around it, Tau Earth, casted technicians moved with calm precision. One of them gestured, "Please sit." My body hesitated. My mind screamed old prayers to an emperor I no longer believed in. This is the moment, Cassian. This is the threshold. I lowered myself into the chair. The restraints clicked shut, not violently but with finality. A mask descended over my face. The air was sharp, chemical clean. I felt the prick of needles at my temples, the press of cold instruments against my spine. My heart hammered, and for a moment I thought I might break free, scream beg for release. Then the officer's voice, the same one who had first welcomed me, spoke from somewhere above. "Do not fear. This is not punishment. This is communion. With this, you cease being a shadow of the Imperium. You become part of something greater." I wanted to resist. I wanted to spit defiance. But my mouth was dry, and all I managed was a whisper. "What happens to me?" "You are given purpose," he replied. Pain lanced through my skull. My vision exploded into color. I saw stars folding in on themselves, great fleets moving in harmony. The endless machinery of empire, but not the Imperium's machinery of death. This was smoother, brighter alive. I smelled ozone and spice, heard voices in languages I did not know yet somehow understood. The sensation was unbearable and intoxicating all at once. When I woke, I was still strapped to the chair. My body ached, but the ache felt purposeful. I raised a trembling hand to my temple. Beneath the skin, a ridge of metal pulsed faintly. An implant, a brand. The officer leaned close, his dark eyes reflecting my confusion. "Rise, Cassian," he said. "No longer a number, no longer a slave. You are Gue'vesa, now a human of the greater good." The restraints clicked open. I stood on unsteady legs, feeling the weight of the implant thrumming inside my skull. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every sound sharper. I could hear the blood rush in my veins, the hum of the lights overhead, the distant footfalls of the crew outside the chamber. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and yet beneath the terror, exhilarating. The officer placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "You feel it, don't you? The connection, the beginning of purpose." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was truth or submission. When they escorted me back to my quarters, the other recruits looked at me differently. Their eyes lingered with a mix of fear and envy. The scarred woman whispered, "Gue'vesa," like it was both curse and prophecy. I lay on my bunk that night, staring at the ceiling. My head throbbed with alien rhythm. For the first time in my life, I was not merely Cassian, the clerk, the failed son of Thus Prime. I was something else, something chosen. And that thought, traitorous, heretical, liberating, kept me awake long into the ship's artificial night. I was no longer just a man who had escaped the Emperor's neglect. I was marked altered bound to a new faith. I was Gue'vesa. Training began at dawn, though there was no sun in the void, only the cycle of lights dimming, then flaring awake. We were marched not as prisoners, but as initiates. The Tau called it orientation, but it was closer to remaking. They stripped away not only our ragged clothing, but the remnants of our identities. No imperial insignias, no worn charms of saints, no scraps of parchment prayers. All gone. In their place, sleek uniforms of muted gray stitched with the insignia of the greater good. When I first put mine on, I felt naked, not for lack of fabric, but because there was no weight of the aquila, no reminder of the Emperor's watchful, silent eyes, only blankness. The drills began simply, stances, movements, breathing. But the Tau had no interest in breaking us with whips or screams. Their instructors observed quietly, correcting with precise gestures. A tilt of the head, a single word in Gothic again. It unsettled me more than any commissar's shout. In the Imperium, failure meant pain, humiliation, execution. Here, failure was met with patience. The Tau seemed to believe mistakes were not heresy, only steps toward refinement. At first, my body resisted. Years bent over ledgers had left me brittle. My lungs burned, my legs trembled, my vision swam with fatigue. But the implant pulsing in my skull drove me on. Each breath seemed amplified, each muscle twitch recorded, measured, corrected. And with every correction came clarity. I began to feel rhythms in the drills, harmonies between breath and movement. It was as though my body had been a broken cog all its life, and now the machine was teaching me how to fit. Weapons training followed, not the crude las rifles of the Guard, but pulse weaponry, sleek, balanced humming with restrained energy. The first time I fired, the recoil was smooth, almost forgiving, yet the bolt seared through the target with terrifying precision. It was elegant, a weapon not just of war, but of art. I remembered the clumsy autoguns of the PDF, the deafening roar of bolters that left ears ringing and arms bruised. Those weapons screamed death. These whispered it, and the whisper was more frightening. The scarred woman trained beside me. Sweat carved lines through the grime on her face, but her eyes gleamed. She leaned close between drills and muttered, "This isn't training, it's rewriting." She was right. I could feel it, each drill, each lecture, each correction, sanding away who I had been. My memories of thus prime of the endless dust and ledgers seemed distant, dulled. In their place, new instincts bloomed. My body moved with purpose I had never known. My mind processed commands faster, my fear dulled to something manageable, almost useful. They called us Gue'vesa openly now. Human auxiliaries, partners in the greater good. The word no longer felt foreign. It felt earned. And yet, late at night, lying in the sterile quiet of my bunk, I wondered had I gained strength or lost the last remnants of myself. Because when I closed my eyes, I no longer saw the Emperor's broken statues or the choking incense of shrines. I saw pulse fire streaking through the dark lines of soldiers moving in harmony, alien banners fluttering above worlds remade. And Emperor, forgive me, those visions no longer filled me with dread. They filled me with anticipation. They had not broken me with chains, they had reshaped me with patience. And I could no longer tell if that was salvation, or the most dangerous corruption of all. They told us the deployment would be routine, a skirmish, a brushfire war on some nameless agri-world. The TOW phrased it gently field assessment for integration units. I knew the truth, it was a test. We boarded the devilfish transports in silence, pulse rifles across our laps, helmets clipped under our arms. Around me, other Gue'vesa shifted nervously. A former guardsman traced an old regimental tattoo. The scarred woman muttered prayers she swore she'd abandoned. I clenched the rifle until my knuckles blanched, as if squeezing hard enough might fuse it to me, make it truly mine. The hatch hissed shut. Darkness. Then the thrumming vibration of engines. A fire-cast sergeant addressed us through the intercom. His Gothic was clipped precise. Today you will serve. Today you prove your worth. The transport jolted. Then the ramp dropped. Light and sound struck at once. The sky was ash gray, choked with smoke. Fields of burning grain stretched to the horizon, and through the haze came shadows, Imperial soldiers. My own kind. Last fire cut through the air, red streaks snapping past us. We ran, not in chaos, but in drilled formations the TOW had burned into us during training. Step, kneel, fire. Step, kneel, fire. My pulse rifle hummed with each shot. The first man I killed wore an Imperial Aquila on his chest. His helmet cracked open under my shot, and he fell backward into the fire. I remember thinking his name is written somewhere on some ledger I might have stamped myself. Then the thought vanished, replaced by another good shot center mass. War has a rhythm. In the Imperium I had recorded it in numbers, casualties, rations, requisitions. Now I felt it in my veins. Orders barked volleys, answered bodies falling in time with the beat of pulse fire. It was horrifying and intoxicating. The Gue'vesa fought hard. Some fell screaming in languages of hive and void. But we held. The firecast advanced like shadows of precision, their armor gleaming, their shots exact. We were not their equals, but we were no longer dead weight. We were part of the machine. At one point, a guardsman broke through the line, charging me with bayonet fixed. His eyes burned with the same faith I once filed into records by the thousands. "Heretic," he screamed. I froze. My body screamed to run. My mind screamed to yield, but the implant whispered calm. My arms lifted. My fingers squeezed. The shot tore through his chest. He fell at my feet. For a moment, everything around me muted the fire, the screams, the endless thunder of war. I stared down at him. He had my face, not in features, but in history. A clerk's son, a dutiful servant of a lie. Then the scarred woman shoved me forward. "Move!" The rhythm resumed. The battle surged. And when at last the smoke thinned, the Imperial banners burned in the fields, trampled beneath Tau boots and Gue'vesa hands. That night, under alien stars, the Firecast commended us. "You are auxiliaries no longer," they said. "You are proven." I lay awake in the barracks, pulse, rifle, still within reach, and realized something terrifying. I had not fought out of loyalty. I had not fought out of hatred. I had fought because for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. On that burning world, I killed my own kind and found myself hungering for the next battle. That was the moment I knew the greater good had claimed me, body and soul. Victory has a taste. Not sweet, not bitter, metallic like blood on the tongue. After the battle, the Firecast feasted on nutrient rations, their armor spotless, their voices calm. The Gue'vesa drank cheap Amasec patching wounds with bandages scrounged from the dead. Two halves of the same coin, we were told, equal under the greater good. But it didn't feel equal. The first cracks appeared in the barracks. One of our own, a former guardsman named Vanar, demanded better medical treatment for a wounded comrade. The medics ignored him until he raised his voice. Then the Firecast sergeant struck him down with a precision blow, leaving him gasping on the floor. The lesson was silent, but sharp. Gue'vesa could bleed for the toe, but not question them. I pretended not to notice, but the image burned into me. Days later, I overheard two fire warriors speaking in their tongue. They did not know I understood fragments of their language enough to catch the words useful stock and limited adaptability. They were talking about us, the Gue'vesa, not comrades, not equals. Stock, tools. And yet when I stood in formation, implant humming, I felt pride. Pride in belonging, pride in surviving. The contradiction gnawed at me. Elra, the scarred woman who had pushed me forward in battle, began to change. She accepted every neural update without hesitation. Her speech softened into the same rehearsed tones I'd once heard in Tau propaganda reels, purpose, harmony, efficiency. Her eyes still held fire in combat, but in quiet moments they looked vacant. I asked her one night, "Do you still dream?" She blinked slowly, as if the question was foreign. Dreams distract from function. The Watercast says, clarity comes from service. Her words chilled me. I wondered what my implant was doing to me when I slept. The Gue'vesa were divided. Some, like Elra, surrendered fully. Others, like Vanar, simmered with resentment, whispering about betrayal in hushed corners. I walked a razor's edge between the two, still trying to believe in the greater good, yet seeing the cracks widen. The toe fed us well, trained us, gave us shelter. More than the Imperium ever had, but everything came with strings. When one of us faltered, hesitated in drills, questioned an order, our punishment was not pain, but correction. Long sessions in white rooms, guided meditations, with soothing voices, implants tuned to harmonize thought patterns. Those who returned smiled too easily, spoke too calmly, as if their doubts had been erased, not resolved. I kept my own doubts hidden. I learned to nod at the right times, recite the phrases, mimic the serenity they expected. All the while I wrote notes in cipher, buried deep in hidden corners of my bunk. A record of myself, proof that I was still me. The breaking point came during another deployment. Not a battle and execution. A settlement of humans who had refused integration. Families clinging to Imperial relics, worshipping the Emperor in secret. The Toe called it pacification. We were ordered to surround the settlement, disarm the resistors, and deliver them to Watercast overseers for re-education. I saw children clutching wooden aquillas, old men chanting prayers through cracked voices. They weren't soldiers, they weren't threats. Yet the firecast barked orders, herding them like cattle. One old woman spat at my boots and whispered, "Traitor." I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt shame. That night, Vanar confronted me. "You saw it, Cassian. You know this isn't liberation, it's chains just painted blue instead of gold." I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend the greater good. But the words caught in my throat, because part of me knew he was right. They said the greater good was freedom. But I began to see it for what it truly was, another cage, and this time the bars were inside my mind. The implant hummed like a parasite at the base of my skull. Most nights I woke to its whisper, tiny pulses of thought, not my own. Not commands, not yet. More like suggestions. Sleep deeper. Forget faster. Smile longer. I realized then that the most dangerous prison wasn't the barracks or the toe overseers. It was the device already grafted into my flesh. So I began testing its boundaries. At first, small acts. I would deliberately think of forbidden words, emperor, rebellion, freedom, just to see if alarms sounded. They didn't, but I felt a flicker in my skull, like static. Correction routines, perhaps. The implant wanted me to forget those thoughts, to bury them. I forced myself to hold them longer, repeat them silently, until they became anchors. Then I learned to resist. During harmonization sessions, the Ta'au played calming visuals while soft voices recited mantras of the greater good. Most humans emerged glassy-eyed, reciting the phrases without hesitation. I bit my tongue until it bled, focusing on the pain, using it as a shield. Pain, I discovered, was mine. They could not override it. Still, resistance was lonely, until the signals came. It started with a scrap of cloth slipped into my bunk, a guardsman's insignia burned and half shredded, too damaged to be random. Beneath it, stitched in faint thread, was a message in old Imperial cipher: "You are not alone." The next day, during munitions loading, I caught a glance from Vanar. His eyes flicked toward my pocket, then away. My heart hammered. He knew. He had left the token. Over the following weeks, subtle signs multiplied. A maintenance drone that lingered too long near my station, its sensor light blinking in coded rhythm. A ration packet folded in a pattern no toe would recognize guard field code for meeting. The network existed hidden within the cracks of the greater good. I followed the trail carefully. Too direct and the toe would see. Too hesitant and the network would never trust me. Eventually, one night I was led down into a maintenance corridor beneath the barracks. Pipes hissed. The air was thick with chemical tang. 3 figures waited in the shadows. Humans like me, but different. Harder. Their implants carried burn scars as if half dismantled. Their eyes were sharp alive, nothing like the glassy stares of the harmonized. "You're Cassian," one said. Her voice was low, rough. "The scribe who survived thus prime. We've watched you. You still think for yourself." I didn't answer immediately. Trust was a currency too easily spent. "And if I do, then you're one of us." They called themselves the Fractured. Gue'vesa, who served in plain sight, but refused the harmonization updates. They sabotaged supply runs, falsified data, smuggled messages to defectors in the wilderness. Always small acts, always deniable. A whisper, war against an empire of silence. I asked them why they hadn't fled. "Run and you vanish alone," the woman said. "Stay and you infect others. Every doubt we plant is a crack in their wall." That night, for the first time, I confessed my fear, that the implant would eventually erode me, that one day I would wake, speak like Elra, smile like a stranger, and never know I had been erased. The Fractured listened. Then one of them, a scarred man with hollow eyes, pressed something into my palm, a sliver of jagged metal. "Pain breaks the pattern," he whispered. "Use it when they try to harmonize you. It'll keep you awake." I clutched it like a relic. My weapon was no longer a quill or a rifle, but resistance carved into flesh. I left that meeting with a choice: keep pretending or risk everything by leaning into the cracks. And deep down I knew pretending would not save me forever. because once you see the bars of your cage, you either rattle them or you let them close for good. They told us the greater good would last 1,000 generations, but all it takes is one spark in the dark to set the whole illusion on fire. They told us it would be routine, another pacification, another village of stubborn Imperials too blind to see the light of the greater good. But from the moment our convoy crested the ridge, I knew this one would be different. Smoke already curled from the settlement below. Not from tow bombardment, this was thicker, darker. Human fire. The villagers had set their own homes ablaze, choking the sky with defiance. Women and children stood in the fields clutching farming tools like weapons. Old men bared teeth with prayers on their lips. There was no submission in their eyes. The Firecast commander raised his hand. Proceed with harmonization protocols. We moved in formation Gue'vesa at the front, Tau behind. Always the same tactic: humans pacify humans while the Xenos observed. They called it trust. I knew it was camouflage. I stepped into the village square and froze. A girl, no older than 10, stood before us holding a wooden aquila carved with clumsy hands. Her voice cut the silence. We are not yours. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the Firecast shouted. Drones, drawers, surged forward, projectors humming ready to stun, but the crowd erupted before they could fire. Stones flew, torches arced. A hidden stubber coughed bullets into the air, striking a drone from the sky. The villagers weren't pleading for mercy. They were fighting. Chaos bloomed. The Gue'vesa line faltered. Some raised rifles and fired warning shots into the air. Others, like Vanar, turned their weapons on the drones outright, shredding metal with las bursts. The implants hummed in my skull, urging restraint, urging obedience. I drove the jagged shard of metal into my palm, pain lancing up my arm. The whispers dulled. My mind stayed my own. I saw Elra in the fray. Her eyes, once dull with harmonization, now blazed with conflict. She hesitated, rifle trembling between villagers and drones. For a moment, I thought she might break free. But then her implant pulsed, her face slackened, and she turned her weapon on the crowd. The first shot dropped an old man where he stood. The square became a slaughterhouse. Flames roared higher as villagers pressed forward. Children hurled stones with suicidal courage. Mothers dragged the wounded into burning homes rather than let them be taken. The Firecast unleashed disciplined volleys, cutting swaths through flesh and smoke. But the line cracked, and then it snapped. A Gue'vesa squad, half a dozen men, turned their rifles on the Tau. The sound of lasfire against battlesuit armor was like a thunderclap of treason. One fire warrior crumpled, another staggered, armor sparking. The pacification dissolved into three-sided war villagers against Gue'vesa. Gue'vesa against Tau Tau, against everyone. I remember the screaming most, not words. Just the raw sound of a people who chose death over chains. By nightfall, the village was ash. The Firecast pulled back with heavy losses. Half the Gue'vesa were dead, some by Tau retaliation, some by their own choice to stand with the villagers. And the square where it had begun was nothing but blackened corpses clutching burned aquilas. Their message carved into memory, clearer than any propaganda. We are not yours. Back at camp, the official report called it resistance neutralized with collateral losses. I filed the data, stamping the seal of compliance with hands that shook. But inside, something snapped. The greater good was no salvation. It was a mask stretched tight over conquest. And that mask had torn tonight, revealing the teeth beneath. They told us pacification was mercy. But in the ashes of that village, I finally understood pacification was war dressed in lies. The smell of the burned village clung to me long after we marched away. Smoke in my hair, ash in my lungs, screams echoing in my skull. I thought I could endure the compromises, the lies of the greater good. But that night carved the truth into my bones. Pacification was not peace, it was erasure. The fractured met 3 nights later in a crawlspace beneath the storage decks. Our faces glistened with sweat from the heat of machinery. No words of greeting, only silence heavy with the memory of the village. Vaynar spoke first. His voice was raw. "We've hidden long enough. The Toe call us auxiliaries, but we are pawns. Tonight proved it. If we wait, they'll erase us piece by piece until nothing of us remains." I looked around the circle, hollow eyes, burn scars from ripped-out implants, all of us carrying the weight of quiet rebellion. "So what then?" I asked. "Sabotage another convoy, delay another shipment, the Toe replace what we break. But they can't replace what burned in that village. Not the defiance. Not the choice. That word hung in the air, choice. The Imperium stole it with fear. The Tao dulled it with harmony. And here we were clinging to scraps of it, daring to believe we might wield it as a weapon." The scarred woman Malus leaned forward. "No more whispers, no more scratches in the dark. We need to act, not just survive. Strike something they cannot hide, something that proves we are not theirs." The plan formed like fire catching dry grass, small at first, then spreading with terrifying inevitability. We would not just sabotage, we would resist openly. A rallying cry for other Gue'vesa, for defectors, drowning in doubt, for anyone who had seen the cracks in the greater good and feared they were alone. The target, a communications relay. The hub that funneled reports, propaganda, and harmonization data between the local cadres. Take it down and the silence would be louder than any speech. The Toe depended on seamless control. Even a moment of disruption could ignite sparks in hidden corners. But the relay was guarded. Fire warriors' drones, automated turrets. To attack it was suicide. We all knew this, and still no one flinched. Because after the village, we understood death in defiance was worth more than life in obedience. That night I returned to my bunk and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The implant hummed softly, probing soothing. I whispered to myself, "Not yours, never yours." Each repetition, a shield, a vow. I cut another shallow line into my palm with the shard of metal, letting pain etch the words deeper. When the day came, we moved like shadows. Civilians in the corridors, auxiliaries at their posts, but underneath steel in our veins. Vaynar carried explosives scavenged from munitions depots. Malus had a stolen access key. I carried only resolve, brittle but unbroken. The relay tower loomed above the settlement like a silent sentinel. Its spire pulsed faint blue broadcasting harmony across the sector. To most, it was just infrastructure. To us, it was the voice in our skulls, the net that bound our thoughts. We slipped inside under the guise of routine maintenance. My implant buzzed harder the closer we drew to the core, as if it sensed the betrayal in my pulse. Sweat ran down my back. One wrong look from a fire warrior, one flicker of suspicion, and the plan would die before it lived. But luck or something greater walked with us. We reached the control chamber. Banks of consoles glowed with Tau script. Drones drifted lazily on patrol. Vaynar set the charges while Malus looped surveillance. My role was simpler, watch the door steady, my breath be ready to die first if it came to that. As the last charge clicked into place, I felt the hum in my implant spike into a sharp ache. A command trying to force its way in. Stand down, report anomaly, comply. I bit hard into my tongue, blood filling my mouth. Pain drowned the whisper. I forced my voice steady. Do it. Light the match. Vaynar's thumb hovered over the trigger. For a moment, the silence stretched into eternity. Then the relay tower screamed as its core ruptured blue fire, arcing into the night sky. Consoles shattered. Drones dropped lifeless to the floor. The voice of harmony was silenced. We ran before the shockwave faded. Sirens wailed. Fire warriors stormed the corridors, their orders sharp confused. But it was too late. The relay was gone, and across the sector silence fell where once there had been only control. That silence was our banner, proof that resistance was possible. They called it sabotage, but in the echo of that fallen tower, I heard something else. Not whispers, not lies. For the first time I heard freedom. The silence didn't last. For 2 days, it felt like victory streets buzzing with rumors. Gue'vesa whispering that the Tau weren't invincible, that their perfect harmony could crack. I even saw fire warriors arguing in public, their discipline rattled by the loss of their precious relay. But on the third night the hammer fell. It began with the sky. Bright streaks of blue fire lanced down from orbit, surgical and merciless. Not at enemy armies, not at fortresses, at hab blocks, at markets, at anywhere humans might gather in numbers. The message was clear: resistance brings fire. Then came the purges. Tow patrols flooded the corridors, their drones scanning implants, pulling out anyone who hadn't undergone full harmonization. Those caught were dragged to processing chambers. Few came back. The ones who did wore vacant smiles, their eyes hollow as broken glass. We, fractured, stayed hidden in crawl spaces and sewage ducts, moving like rats beneath the city. But we couldn't hide forever. One evening, as I crouched in a maintenance tunnel, I heard a voice above me. Elra's. Cassian V. Report for harmonization update. Her tone was flat, but her words cut deeper than any blade. They were searching for me by name now. I pressed my palm against the jagged shard of metal pane, flaring to keep the implant's whispers at bay. Elra's footsteps passed calm and steady, like a hound already smelling blood. That night, we gathered in the deepest chamber we still controlled. A dozen of us, eyes hollow but burning. Vaynar slammed his fist against a bulkhead. "We can't keep running. They'll hunt us down one by one until nothing's left." Then what I asked? My voice was quieter but sharper. "We show ourselves, they'll crush us in a day." Milas leaned forward, scars casting shadows under the flickering lumen. "Or we light a fire they can't put out. Every Gue'vesa who doubts, every human who hesitates, they're waiting for proof. The relay was just the beginning. If we rise openly, others will follow." Silence settled over us, heavy and suffocating. The choice was death either way. Hide and die forgotten, rise and die remembered. I thought of the village of children clutching Aquilus as flames consumed them. I thought of Elra's eyes empty where once they held fury, and I knew hiding had already killed us. "We stop being shadows," I said finally. "We become a flame, a dangerous one they can't smother without burning their hands." Agreement rippled through the chamber. Not cheers, just grim nods, the sound of a people choosing defiance. The plan was reckless. It had to be. We would strike not at infrastructure this time, but at symbols. The ethereal visiting the sector was due to speak at the central plaza, delivering the same honeyed promises about unity and harmony. The plaza would be filled with Gue'vesa Tau drones, every layer of their machine watching. If we struck there in the heart of their propaganda, the message would echo farther than any relay tower. But it would also mean war. As we dispersed, I caught my reflection in a cracked panel hollow, cheeks, bloodshot eyes, a man carved thinner by guilt and fire. Not the scribe I once was, not even the auxiliary I had pretended to be. Something harder, something sharper. The implant hummed in my skull, angry, insistent. But for the first time, I smiled, because I no longer needed to resist its whispers. I had chosen louder ones, voices of defiance. They thought the hammer would shatter us, but sometimes when iron is struck hard enough, it doesn't break. It forges. They herded us into the plaza at dawn. Tow drone hovered overhead, silent eyes of the regime. Fire warriors stood in neat rows, rifles at rest but never relaxed. And at the center, the great dais, a gleaming platform of silver and blue, where the ethereal would speak of harmony, unity, the greater good. I felt the implant thrum like a war drum against my skull, urging calm, urging obedience. I pressed the jagged shard into my palm until blood ran down my wrist. Pain kept me human. Pain kept me free. Around me, the fractured blended with the crowd. Vaynar hunched like a tired worker, explosives hidden beneath his ragged cloak. Milas carried nothing but her scars and a voice that could shatter silence. I carried only a las rifle scavenged from the dead and a resolve sharper than any blade. The ethereal appeared at last. Robes of silver rippled in the breeze. His face was serene. Too serene, a mask carved to inspire trust. His voice flowed smooth as water. "Children of the stars, Today you stand united in purpose. Humanity and Tao no longer divided, but one people under the greater good. Fear is gone. Conflict is gone. Only harmony remains. The crowd murmured prayers of obedience, but among them we waited, hearts pounding, fingers clenched, eyes burning. Then it began. Vanar lit the charges beneath the dais. The ground shook. The ethereal's words faltered. Blue fire erupted, toppling drones, scattering fire warriors in disarray. Gasps turned to screams, and from the chaos, Malus raised her voice, not a whisper, not a cipher, but a roar that cut through the smoke. "We are not yours." The plaza erupted. Gue'vesa dropped their rifles, some turning them on their former masters. Others shielded children and dragged them from the killing zone. Fire warriors opened fire in disciplined volleys, but the crowd no longer cowered. They surged forward, hurling stones, knives, stolen weapons. I raised my las rifle and fired, not into the air this time, into armor, into the regime. Each shot burned away another chain. The ethereal stumbled, robes scorched, his calm mask cracking. Drones swarmed to protect him, their weapons, spitting plasma into the crowd. But the spell was broken. The illusion of harmony lay in rubble with the shattered dais. Everywhere I looked, the lie unraveled. Villagers, once meek, now fought with desperation. Gue'vesa, who had whispered doubts, now shouted defiance. Even harmonized ones hesitated, implants buzzing as their humanity clawed to the surface in the face of fire and blood. The plaza became a battlefield. Not Tau versus Imperium, not soldier versus soldier, but human versus cage. I remember dragging a wounded child from the path of a drone firing until its shell cracked. I remember Malus on the steps, her voice hoarse but unyielding, rallying rebels as fire warriors closed around her. I remember Vanar falling, blood pooling but smiling through broken teeth because the fire he lit still burned. And through it all, the ethereal's voice tried to rise above the chaos. "Cease this madness. You are children of the greater good." But his words no longer carried weight. Not here, not now. I don't remember pulling the trigger, only the recoil. A shot lanced across the dais, grazing the ethereal's shoulder, tearing silver into crimson. Gasps rippled louder than any sermon. For the first time, they saw him bleed. And in that blood, we saw truth. The Toe were not gods. They could be wounded. They could be defied. The battle raged until smoke choked the sky and the plaza was unrecognizable. We did not win, not in numbers, not in power, but we won something greater, a symbol. The ethereal bled, the relay lay in ruins, and the greater good was no longer unquestioned. They will call us terrorists. They will call us heretics. But in the plaza that day, with blood and fire, we became something more dangerous than either. We became free.